This is Cliff. Thanks for listening. This first story is also the first story that I ever wrote to be told to an audience. It was for a Toastmasters Tall Tales contest, and I wrote it in about 1979. The name of the story is Mommy and Daddy Have Always Liked Mikey Best. My name is Cliff Ibsen. I am 6 years old. There are 4 in my family: Mommy and Daddy, Mikey, and me. Mikey is 4 years older than I am, and Mommy and Daddy have always liked Mikey best. I think I was a mistake. Mikey is a real chow hound. He eats anything. I hate all those vegetables like broccoli and asparagus and stringy beans. I hate all that grass stuff. Mikey will eat everything, just put a little gravy on it. Mikey normally walks to school with me. But there are hot days when he sneaks off to the river to go swimming, or if he can find someone to play ball with him, he's gone in a flash. Sometimes I get mad at him and I tattle on him to Mommy. But she always says the same thing: you mind your own business, and she'll take care of Mikey. When I ride to the store with Mommy, she wants me to buckle my seatbelt. Don't roll down the windows. For heaven's sake, don't stick my head out the window or arm out. They'll get knocked off by a passing tree or something. But when Mikey rides with Daddy in the truck, he has his head way out the window, smiling and pretending that he's in a hurricane. My birthday is in August. You know what I got for my birthday? Clothes. Yuck! Who wants clothes? Mommy says I'll look good at school and at church. I don't think God even cares what I look like at church. You know what Mikey got for his birthday? A new baseball. And then Daddy just built him a key new hut out in the backyard where he can sleep overnight whenever he wants. Wow. But the real reason I think Mommy and Daddy like Mikey best is because he kisses all the aunts and uncles. He even kisses Aunt Mary, who has a mustache. I hate all that mushy stuff. Sometimes I wish I had never been born. Or born a German Shepherd like Mikey is. This next story is about my growing up. I hope after you hear it, you will have more sympathy for all the kids in the world who are the youngest in their family. It is called Christmas and the Wonderful Gift of Knowledge. This is a true story. It happened many years ago when I was a young boy, and it ends on Christmas. I am one of 6 kids. There were 3 girls and then 3 boys, and I was the youngest. This makes me the baby of the family. Most of you have no idea what it means to be the baby of the family. You could be 6'6", weigh 350 pounds, and your real name is Bubba. And if you were the youngest of the family, you will always be introduced as, this is the baby of the family. I'll bet you also have some idea in your mind that the baby of the family is spoiled, pampered, and gets whatever it wants. Lies, 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 all propagated by the eldest of the family, who historically inherited the birthright. The eldest, right? Who historically inherited the estate when the parents died? The eldest. What is the one thing that the youngest or baby of the family is guaranteed to get? Hand-me-down clothes. But I will say this, hand-me-down clothes is the one reason that I was glad that the next older in my family was a boy. Otherwise I would have worn a dress and panties until I was 16. Most of you don't know that the eldest of all families sign a blood pact that they will do anything necessary to eradicate the youngest of the family. cuts down on the competition. It all goes back to Cain and Abel, the first two brothers in the Bible. If you went to the original Hebrew version of Genesis, you would find that it says there, verily, verily, the eldest brother Cain murdered his baby brother Abel. Now my sisters, bless them, they did not want me to end up like Abel. So they enrolled me in the Federal Baby Brother Protection Program. It's a little-known federal program that has been highly successful. I am living proof that the program is a success. Without bragging, if you were to put the three brothers in my family alongside each other, I was the cream of the crop, the pick of the litter. I had a chubby little face, rosy red complexion, a nice little body, and long blonde curls. If I had been the eldest of the family, you would see today a strapping, well-built, good-looking, ruggedly handsome man with wavy golden hair. Instead, because of all the psychological and emotional abuse that I suffered as the baby of the family, what am I? A tall, skinny, aging guy with thinning hair who is a mere smidgen of the genetic potential that I had in the cradle. My brothers used lies and distortion and stretching of the truth as the primary psychological tools to abuse me. Their goal was to keep me as dumb as possible. I believe with the ultimate objective of me getting myself killed out of sheer stupidity, and there wouldn't be anyone to blame. Kids learn so much at an early age nowadays. If you were to go up to a 10-year-old today and ask him what he knows about the birds and bees, he is apt to answer. I don't know about anybody else, but I came about by in vitro fertilization, and Tom Cruise was the sperm donor. When I began to wonder where little babies come from, I asked my brothers. They said, Cliff, don't you pay attention to all the magazines and newspapers that come into the house? I mean, if you look at any advertisement for a baby product, what do you see? A big bird with a giant beak, and hanging out of the beak is a diaper with a baby in it. The stork brought you. Do you think that advertisers would lie to you? I said, oh, probably not. I was just checking. But tell me, how come some families, Italian families, have more kids than other families do? My brother said, Cliff, you need to pay attention to the world around you. Every Sunday we drive through the Italian part of town, right by St. Rita's Catholic Church, where there's a big sign out front, and it says, practice birth control, shoot a stork. The reason that the Italians have large families is that they're all lousy shots. It's the same reason that they lost World War II. My mama was a big influence on me growing up. She was built like an NFL running back. She was 5'3" tall and weighed about 230 pounds. And fully corseted, she was the epitome of the expression, so round, so firm, so fully packed. But Mama was smart. She knew that if she left me home alone with my older brothers when she went shopping, she might come home and find that she is the mother of 5 kids, not 6. Therefore, when Mama went shopping, I went shopping with her. Mama didn't know how to drive. Therefore, to go shopping, we got on a bus and went into the city and started walking. When Mama shopped, she was on a mission. She shopped with zeal, with fervor. She knew what she wanted, where she was going to get it, and how much she was going to pay for it. She had no time for dilly-dallying or window shopping. Mama went through the crowds like a hot knife going through butter. The crowds on the sidewalk would hear the clippity-clop of her granny good-body shoes, and it was like Moses dividing the Red Sea, and we went through on dry land. was round. She didn't have a sharp edge on her. She knew all about aerodynamics and drafting long before NASCAR thought they invented it. Mama had 2 bits of advice for me. Keep up and stay close. If I kept up, there was no concern about me staying close. I was sucked along in the draft behind her. I was like a flea in the tail of a bumblebee. By the time I got to the 1st or 2nd grade, I realized that there were other mamas out there that didn't look like my mama. My mama was round, but there were other mamas out there who had distinct curves. You could see where their hips started and their hips ended. You could see where other curves started and ended. I dreamt that someday, if I ever got married, I would marry a woman who had curves. The first one to get married in my family was my next to the oldest sister. She was tall and slim, and I thought she was beautiful. She had curves. I went to her wedding and I cried. I thought my brother-in-law was going to take her far, far away, and I was never going to see her again. Turns out that he took her only across town, and we saw her on a regular basis. In about a year, I thought to myself, why didn't my brother-in-law take my sister far, far away so I could not see what marriage does to a woman? Every time I saw my sister, she looked more and more like Mama. In fact, worse. Whereas Mama was round all over, she had developed this enormous beer belly, although I was pretty sure she didn't even drink beer. Christmas came that year and was celebrated at my family's house. Everyone was there, including my sister and brother-in-law. As I looked at my brother-in-law, I could see love in his eyes as he looked at my sister. I remember thinking as I looked at him, that you're a better man than I'll ever be. A year ago, you married a greyhound, and now you're married to a greyhound bus. Christmas Day festivities came to a close, and my sister and her husband went home. About 2 or 3 hours later, there was a phone call, and the news was that my sister had been taken suddenly to the hospital. More unbelievable than that, they said I had become an uncle. I had a nephew. I could not believe it. I had seen no stork. How was this possible? The next day, Mama and I went to the hospital to see my sister. I remember walking down the hall and turning into her room, and there stood my sister holding this red-faced, ugly little thing and saying, "Isn't he cute?" All that was secondary. The only thing that I noticed was that my sister's belly was gone. Then it came to me like a lightning bolt out of the blue. I didn't know how he had gotten in there, and I sure didn't know how he had gotten out of there. But I knew that my nephew had been in the belly of my sister. Christmas will always be a sacred and religious holiday to me, the birth of the Lord Jesus Christ. But in terms of Christmas presents, that Christmas will remain in my memory forever as the time when I received the wonderful gift of knowledge. The stork was a fraud, and I knew it. I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. I have always liked to go fast in cars. As my daughter Katie grew up, I started taking her on roller coaster rides, and we've continued to have adventures even up to today. Most of the time, my wife Sharon has refused to be left out. So although she may be really scared, she'll join in, and that has added to the fun. This is a story about one of our most exciting and scary adventures. It's called Jacques Cousteau, Sharon, and Me. Several years ago, missionary friends of ours invited my wife Sharon, daughter Katie, and me to visit them in Palau in the South Pacific. Palau happens to be one of the premier places in the world to scuba dive. All my life, I had dreamed of scuba diving. When I was young, I had seen Jacques Cousteau, the inventor of scuba, many times on television. And he was about 5'3" tall and weighed about 87 pounds. I mean, he made me look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I figured, if Jacques Cousteau can do this, why not me? But my wife, Sharon, she was terrified at the thought of learning to scuba dive. I mean, she had good reasons. Let's face it, not many people learn to scuba dive after they become AARP members. Besides, early in our married life, we signed up for group scuba diving lessons at the YMCA, and we flunked. We both flunked the ditch and recovery training maneuver. This is a loony maneuver where you scuba down to the bottom of the deep end of the pool, take all your gear off, including your tank, regulator, fins, mask, weight, belt, and then you come back up to the surface. Then they make you turn around and dive back down and put all your gear back on again. Let's face it, this is not something you're going to have to do in the ocean. But it's what all the macho dive instructors made their students do back then. But this time around, we signed up for private lessons. And although Sharon shed many, many tears, we all got certified, including then 17-year-old Katie. And dreaming of scuba diving, I just wanted to see exotic tropical fish and coral in a rainbow of colors and patterns and sizes and shapes. But you know, most scuba divers who go halfway around the world to Palau are there to dive with the sharks. When I first heard this, I said, these people are obviously insane. But by the time we left, our missionary friends, Rob and Ava, they had convinced me, intellectually at least, that there is so much food out there on the reefs that human flesh is not that attractive to the average shark. Besides, Jacques Cousteau hates power. The island nation of Palau is spectacularly beautiful with hundreds of jungle-covered islands and crystal clear water. It was not until our first dive in Palau that I realized that they dive differently over there than we did in the Gulf of Mexico in our checkout dives. In the Gulf of Mexico, the dive boat goes out, anchors over a shipwreck on the bottom, and you scuba down the anchor rope, swim around a while on the wreck, and then you come back up the anchor rope and get back on your dive boat. In Palau, they do what is called drift diving. That is, you descend and let the current take you, and where and when you come up is determined by when and where you run out of air. Now, everyone starts with the exact same amount of air, one tank worth. But then it's up to you how fast you use it up. How fast you use it up is dependent on a variety of factors like how much you weigh and how deep you dive. But the critical factor is fear. As I descended on my first dive, I could hear pounding in my ears the theme song from Jaws. As we descended further, I looked back up through the water at the beautiful tropical sun beaming down. And I knew in my heart that up there on the surface was where God designed me to be. And that the only thing keeping me alive down here was this stinking little regulator in my mouth. I looked over at my dive buddy, my beautiful daughter Katie, my daughter whom I would gladly give my life for. I just don't want to do it today. And then I looked out into the deep, and there was 1, 3, 5 sharks. And sure, I know intellectually that the average shark doesn't like to eat humans. But how do I know that there isn't some weird Lee Harvey Oswald shark out there today who wants to make a name for himself? As a result, I started breathing like this. Now guess who ran out of air first? Yes, me. Me and my missionary buddy Rob. He weighs 1.5 times what I do. When I started to run out, I signaled him, and Katie and his wife Ava then buddied up and continued to dive while Rob and I went to the surface. After we were picked up by the dive boat, an additional 5 or 10 minutes went by before Katie and Ava came up, and they were so proud facade of being able to dive longer than the men. Meanwhile, where is my scaredy cat wife, Sharon, who shed all those tears during dive training? Let me tell you, she is still down there diving. She is welded to the arm of our handsome dive master, Lance. Lance is a guy who could make a handsome living for himself posing for men's underwear commercials. Is Sharon scared? No, she doesn't have a care in the world. She's on the Gray Lines tour of the Palawan Reefs with Lance doing the driving. So about 15 to 20 minutes after Katie came up, Sharon and Lance finally glide to the surface. And Sharon is just bubbling about all the wonderful things that Lance has shown her down on the reef. When we got to our last dive, I told Sharon that because her dives had been 2, 3, 4 times the length of mine, that it was only fair that she and I should trade places, and I should have some male bonding time with Lance, and she could have some quality mother-daughter time with Katie. Well, I won't say she got mad, but she did say something like, "Why don't you just slather my body down with fish guts, put 100-pound cement block around my ankles, and just throw me overboard to the sharks, because I will die without Lance." Well, guess what? Yes, Katie and I again teamed up for the last dive. In fact, we all had a fantastic dive, my longest, as we hooked into the coral reef and watched huge schools of fish go by, including more sharks than I hope to be in the water with for the rest of my life. Well, it all ended well. Thank you, Lord. We had the thrill of a lifetime, and because of the photographer I hired, we have pictures to prove it. And even though I now have more pictures of Sharon with Lance than we have of Sharon and me at our wedding, it was all worth it. And as Jacques Cousteau would say, you have not lived until you have dove with the sharks. Try it. You may like it. As much as I kid about the trials of being the baby of the family, I truly feel that I am blessed to be from a large family. We love and enjoy each other's company. This is a story about Sharon and my sister-in-law, Ruth, which gives you just a small insight into these two special women in my life. The name of this story is Ruth the Shark-Toothed Queen. "It's not fair," Sharon said to me. Sharon is a great advocate of justice. She believes that life should be fair, and she also hates to lose at anything. For competitiveness, that 120-pound woman makes Michael Jordan look like Mr. Rogers. What she was upset about this time was that we had gone to Myrtle Beach for a big family reunion, and my sister-in-law, Ruth, the Shark-Toothed Queen, had already found a couple of fossil shark's teeth on the beach in the first day and a half, while Sharon had found none. Ruth, who has the eyes of an eagle, has literally found hundreds of fossil shark's teeth in the sand. She has jars full of shark's teeth, some of them over an inch long with serrations along one edge. Conversely, Sharon, even with the help of Katie and myself over the years, has accumulated about 12 to 15 small shark's teeth, and some of them may actually be tiny pieces of burnt wood. That's really unfair, isn't it? Well, those were the words that were echoing in my brain as I went to sleep. That night, it was like I got a revelation, God speaking to me on how to make all things right and fair. The next day, without anyone seeing me, I slipped off to downtown Myrtle Beach, and I bought a prize-winning 3-inch long fossil shark's tooth. Later that day, I went walking with Sharon, and I suggested that rather than walking right along the edge of the water where the shark's teeth are normally found, we walk along the high tide line where there are lots of debris that have washed up, and maybe we would get lucky looking for a shark's tooth. At about a half to 3/4 of a mile down the beach, Sharon said, "Oh, it's time to turn around and go back to the condo. All the families gathering at Ruth's condo for dinner." I suggested that we just walk another 50 to 100 yards down to a post in the ground. She agreed. When she was ahead of me a little ways, I reached into my pocket and took this baby out and let it drop into the debris. When we turned around, I continued to walk behind Sharon as she scanned the beach, walking toward the condo. At the spot, I saw Sharon look down and then reach down, and she picked up the tooth. She turned around and said, "Look at this. I can't believe it. I can't believe it." And then she started jumping up and down and hollering, "Oh, I think it's a behemoth's tooth. Wait till Ruth sees this." And then she was off at warp speed toward the condo. At the condo, she couldn't wait for the elevator. She actually levitated 7 floors right up to Ruth's condo where all the family was gathered. She burst through the door and screamed, "Look what I found! Look what I found!" She ran across the room and gave the tooth to Ruth. The Queen took one long, hard look at it. She turned it over in her hand and then screamed, "It isn't fair! It isn't fair! Here I've been looking for shark's teeth for over 30 years, and sure, I've found a bunch of them, but they're all small, puny-looking little teeth compared to this giant." The next day, Doubting Thomas, Ruth's husband and my brother, went into downtown Myrtle Beach, and he came back and said, "You'll never believe how much they charge for a fossil shark's tooth that size." He told me, and I said, "Wow, that is hard to believe." For the rest of the week, Sharon basked in the glory and adoration of finding the tooth. All conversation ultimately came back to the tooth. Sharon was stopping people on the street and asking them if they wanted to see her prize. But all good things must come to an end. And at the end of the week, we returned to Huntsville. When we got home, we unpacked the car, and following tradition, we started to put things away from the trip. Sharon was down in the kitchen, Katie was in her bedroom, and I was in the master bedroom. And as I started to unpack our suitcases, I knew eventually that I would have to tell the whole story. When I found the shark's tooth wrapped in a soft cloth in Sharon's suitcase, I called Katie in from her bedroom and handed her the beloved tooth. She said, "Oh, Dad, isn't it incredible that Mom found this fantastic tooth?" I said, "Yeah, it is." And then I handed her a piece of paper, the cash register receipt for the tooth, which said, "1 shark's tooth, $30. Katie looked at the receipt for quite a while and then said, "You didn't." I said, "I did." Katie said, "Mom's going to be mad." I said, "I know. That's why you're here." And then Katie began to laugh, and we had this wonderful father-daughter time of laughter. It was a wonderful shared time together. But then Sharon heard us laughing from down in the kitchen, and she came up into the bedroom and said, "All right, what's the big joke? I want to laugh too." I said, "It really wasn't that funny. But Katie and I had been looking at your tooth, and I handed her this piece of paper and then gave Sharon the cash register receipt. She stared at it a lot longer than Katie had, and then she said, "You didn't." I said, "I did." She said, "How could you make me the laughing stock of the whole family?" I said, "I didn't do that. I made you the envy of the whole family. Everyone wished that they had been the one to find the tooth." Sharon is a good woman. And she eventually calmed down. She then said, you know, Ruth is going to be upset. I said, I know. And I went and composed a little poem about how Ruth had been the undisputed shark-toothed queen for years and years, and then had been just overthrown by Sharon. But now the truth must come out that the humongous tooth discovery was really a practical joke, and only Ruth deserved to have the title Shark-Toothed Queen. And I sent the poem off to all of the family that had been at the beach. The first one to get the poem was my niece Diane, Ruth's daughter, who called her mom and said she needed to go get Uncle Cliff's letter out of the mailbox as soon as possible. Ruth called me that night after I got home from work. Have you ever noticed that some people seem to have royal blood in their veins? You can see it in how they walk, in their regal bearing, how they talk and interact with others. I believe that Ruth is one of those people. When Ruth got me on the phone, she said in a manner worthy of true royalty, of a real queen, Cliff, I have only one thing to say to you, and that is, I believe that the next tall tale was the second story and the first and only poem that I ever wrote to be told to an audience. It was written when I still lived in Los Angeles. There's a famous restaurant there called Lowry's Prime Rib Restaurant, and it is mentioned in this short story. The name of my story is Old Blue Eyes and Me. Oh, I yawned, I stretched, I stumbled to the puddle. After 3 days underground, my head was in a terrible muddle. I stared at my reflection and noted I was exquisitely fair. 2 pairs of wings, 6 legs, and lots of long black hair. My eyes were large and faceted in many hexagonal parts. The reflection of 600 of me gave me a momentary start, but I caught my breath and gave a great big sigh, because that was me, 100% purebred housefly. The sun felt warm and good on my damp little wings. I was about ready to give flying a fling. Vroom, vroom, 300 beats a minute without a doubt. Ferrari, Maserati, eat your hearts out. Suddenly, what did I hear but someone calling my name? It was Old Blue Eyes, a fly of great fame. He was a true fly of the world, a regular bon vivant. And he invited me to come, taste the sight of life that most flies can't. Up and away, I followed Old Blue Eyes in a flash. I was soon tooling along at 30 miles an hour, hoping I don't crash. The first stop, he said, would be a Bon Appetit splendor. Yes, it was Lowry's Prime Rib, rare, juicy, and tender. Old Blue Eyes performed a crisp snack roll in front of the waiter's face, and at the prime rib, he said a reverent pre-meal grace. A brief snack, a drop of wine, and off he flew in a dash, barely escaping the waiter's hand impacting in a murderous crash. It's all in the timing, the fly of the world noted. But now, let me show you some culture to which I'm devoted. So off we flew to the Museum of the Classical Arts, to the Mona Lisa, which we examined in its minutest parts. I could feel my cultural self expanding from all this art display. But alas, we died there, the victim of a cruel, ugly guard and raid! This is a story about Sharon and myself. It is about some things we love and some things we're scared of. It is called Snowmobiling and Buffalo. I hate the cold and snow of northern winters. I was born and raised in Connecticut, and I knew I didn't like cold weather from the first time my mom pushed me out the door and I could see my breath. I also wasn't good at winter sports, all of which require balance. With my balance, I felt more like the puck in hockey than one of the players. And in skiing, I felt like an avalanche waiting to happen. I loved sports involving vehicles with big, powerful engines that went really fast. A couple of years after college, I moved to Southern California to get out of the cold of Connecticut. And there I met and married my wife, Sharon. I have always believed in women's lib. That is, given that a woman is smart and works hard, there should not be any reason why she shouldn't rise to the top of an organization and be the boss. I just frankly wasn't sure that I wanted to be married to a woman's liber. The day I proposed to Sharon, I asked if she would like to go for a motorcycle ride with me. She very reluctantly agreed, which should have given me a clue. To have the most fun on a motorcycle, the rider, the passenger, and the bike must be one, leaning in perfect unison as you go from one turn into the next. This sounded suicidal to Sharon, and her woman's lived instinct told her to remain in an upright position regardless of what I did, so she could jump free in case I did something really foolish like lean too far in one direction. With her screaming into my ear, "Slow down, slow down," I am not sure I ever got out of second gear on that ride. But Sharon still uses the fact that she actually got on the back of the motorcycle with me as evidence of how submissive a wife she had been willing to be. Early in our marriage, we went back east at Christmas time to spend a weekend with my college roommate and his wife in New Hampshire. This was our first taste of snowmobiling. Here was a winter sport that I figured I could really enjoy. With my butt only a foot or so off the ground, I could go really fast and be in control. Not at all like me coming down a ski slope. It was after dark when we arrived, but it is never too late for a snowmobile enthusiast to go riding. My instruction in driving a snowmobile consisted of one trip around the parking lot and then, "Let's go." Now Sharon, she is fearless behind the wheel of her car as she races at Mach 1 in the fast lane to make an appointment which started 5 minutes before she left home. You see, she operates under the theory that no matter how late you are when you leave, you have a chance of arriving on time if you drive fast enough. However, she refused to drive her own snowmobile, I believe because it didn't have a steering wheel or a gas pedal. Sharon trusts me almost totally in many areas of our married life, like working, saving, bill paying, coming up with solutions for world peace. But put her behind me on the seat of a snowmobile and it was just like being on that motorcycle again with her screaming in my ear, "Slow down, slow down!" And we hadn't gotten out of the parking lot. It was less than ideal conditions that night for a brand new snowmobiler. Darkness, snowing, visibility limited to what we could see with the headlight, and a narrow, winding trail through the woods. To this day, Sharon and I don't agree on exactly what happened that night. She claims I was going 20 to 30 miles an hour through the woods, and I say more like 5 or 10 miles an hour. I remember as we came around a turn on the side of a little hill, I leaned up the hill to keep it from tipping over. That's when I think Sharon had a flashback to the motorcycle and she either leapt off or leaned her body and arms down the embankment to break the fall in case the snowmobile fell over on its side, which it did. Either way, neither of us were really hurt, and we went on to have a wonderful weekend, although I did end up deaf in my left ear from all her hollering. Now skip ahead about 30 years. And a few years ago, at the recommendation of my college roommate, we went to Yellowstone National Park to ride snowmobiles and see all the natural beauty and animals. By now, we lived here in Huntsville, and Katie was 19 years old. Katie also, coincidentally, likes to drive fast. I blame this on the Alabama redneck influence, or the influence of Sharon driving all those days to school and leaving at 8:05 when Katie was supposed to be in class at 8 o'clock. When we arrived at Yellowstone, I knew I was back in my element of fast, loud, big snowmobiles. Earlier on this trip, I had tried my hand at driving a dog sled, and I had managed to dump Katie and Sharon and the dog sled into a snowbank. But that's another story. I only mention that to note that snowmobiles are lots better than dog sleds. When you let off the throttle, they slow down. Dogs only slow down when they reach the next dog. Besides, snowmobiles have no built-in desire to catch up and smell the rear end of the snowmobile ahead of them. And they don't bark and pee a whole lot after catching the other snowmobiles. Who could ask for anything more than riding a snowmobile in Yellowstone? Answer, Sharon could. After 30 plus years of marriage, Sharon still remembers our motorcycle ride and snowmobiling in New Hampshire and other adventures we've had, and she believes, frankly, that dogs, cats, and virtually all animals have a far greater self-preservation instinct than I do. Also, all animals love Sharon, and they generally respond to her as she goes, "Here, doggy, doggy, doggy," or kitty, or moosey, or buffalo, or whatever animal you want to fill in. I do not have Sharon's love of all animals, big and small, and most of them seem to instinctively know this. We went on this adventure with another couple who are very good at winter sports. Of the 5 of us, 4 wanted to go somewhere between 30 and 40 miles an hour on the road. But Sharon was convinced that centrifugal force at anything over 20 miles an hour would rip her off the back of the snowmobile and launch her like an unguided missile up through the surrounding trees. Yellowstone was beautiful, and there were lots of buffalo and elk to see. But because it had not snowed recently, the roads really were quite bumpy and rough. After snowmobiling all day, that evening it was late as we headed back to our hotel from Old Faithful. Our friends, under the pretense of wanting to avoid a late return fee on the snowmobiles, took off at high speed with Katie on their tail. They were employing the theory that although the snow was badly rutted on the roads, if you went fast enough, you skimmed from the top of one rut to the next, and it really was smoother, and of course, lots more fun. Conversely, Sharon, who had insisted we go at a speed on the way into the park where we traced the full contour of each and every rut, now said that each and every one of her internal organs had been pounded into the shape and consistency of a walnut, and we should take our time going back out. Thus, alone in the growing darkness, we came upon 12 to 15 full-grown, massive buffalo walking down the center of the road, going our direction. After staying behind them for several minutes, I concluded that they were probably walking back the full 20 miles to the park entrance, and I decided that I needed to idle the snowmobile past the buffalo. 1/3 of the way past them, Sharon started pounding on my back to stop so that she could take a picture of the buffalo. which were now walking alongside us about 5 feet away. I thought, no way am I going to stop alongside a 2,000-pound animal with horns who probably will not be fond of a camera flash going off in his eyes. Sharon was going, aren't they beautiful? Oh, I wish we could stop. Stop, Cliff. I want to pet them. I ultimately passed the whole line of buffalo, and I pulled the safe 20 to 30 yards ahead, and I told Sharon to just turn around and take a nice zoom lens picture of the lead buffalo. Sharon, women's liver that she is, she got off the snowmobile, and she waited until the lead buffalo caught up with us and took a flash picture of him. There, that was great, she said, and hopped back on the snowmobile. I can only say, thank you, Lord. I think that the lead buffalo could probably smell my sweat, and he said, that boy's going to die of fright anyway. No point in attacking him. The next day, Sharon was telling everyone about the marvelous photo op from the previous night. She made the mistake of telling a park ranger about her photographing the buffalo. When the ranger informed her how many people had been gored, trampled, and otherwise injured the previous year by tormented buffalo, she was only slightly contrite. She confided in me that the park ranger probably was not aware how effective really was. The moral of this story is, if you are ever in a large, crowded room, and my wife and I are there, and a wild rhinoceros comes pounding through the back door, and you are cowardly like me, I suggest you try and beat me to that door or window or the hole that I'm going to make through the wall. However, if you are slow of foot, fear not. Sharon is going to leap out in the path of the rhinoceros and go, nice rhino, nice, nice rhino. And if you believe her, he will stop dead in his tracks, and you will all soon be scratching him under the chin. This story took place the year after I graduated from college. I had gone back home to live after college to pay off my debts, and my mom, who was a worrier, never knew where I was going until after I came back from this adventure. The name of this story is the first word out of my mouth when I start to tell it. Ah! Don't push! That's what I screamed as I exited from the plane during my first parachute jump. You see, I am scared to death of heights. But when I was young, I thought, wouldn't it be an incredible thrill to parachute out of a plane? So I did. As part of the sign-up procedure, I had to certify that not only was I sound in mind, but that I also was in tip-top physical shape. Unfortunately, I can't hear a rip out of my left ear, but I was determined to jump. So when the parachute center questionnaire asked, "How is your hearing?" I checked the block that said, "Flawless," and went on to the next question. The two most important parts of a successful parachute jump are the exit from the plane and the landing on the ground. The exit is critical because you have to be stable in the air when the chute opens. To train for the exit maneuver, they had me sit on a wooden platform with my butt about 3 feet off the ground and my feet about 6 inches off the ground. From there, I leapt into this little sand pit and assumed a spread eagle formation. Arms spread, legs spread. Time after time, I did this. Each one was picture perfect. I was good. If a recruiter from the Army Golden Knights parachute team had been there, he would have said, "Sign this boy up. We need him." This was before the era of the modern parasail-like parachute that lets guys come down in these prissy tippy-toe landings. My parachute was more like a World War II vintage chute, and when you landed, it was like jumping off of a 10-foot-high ladder. So the landing was critical. They taught us something called the parachute landing fall. This involved landing on the balls of your feet, rolling over onto your calves and then onto your thighs and then your hips, taking out the momentum of your fall. I practiced this maneuver again by first sitting on that same platform and then jumping and gracefully pirouetting in one fluid motion and slowly sinking to the ground like a ballet dancer in a death scene. Had Rudolf Nureyev or Mikhail Baryshnikov been there, they would have probably asked me to audition for the Bolshoi Ballet. Having now mastered the two critical maneuvers of exit and landing, I was ready for the real thing. As we taxied down the runway and took off and started climbing to altitude, I noticed that where there ought to be a door on the side of the plane, there was just a gaping hole in the side of the plane. I thought, now, if this plane hits an air pocket and the plane rolls abruptly, I'm going to get thrown out that door. So I spent the whole time holding on for dear life. Now, it is almost impossible to get souvenir photos when you are holding on with both hands. At altitude, we flew in an elliptical pattern, letting one jumper go out at a time, upwind of the jump target. Men went out. Women went out. Children went out. Infants went out. Then there was no one left but me, and it was now my turn. I literally got down on my hands and knees and crawled. I slithered across the floor of the plane to where the jump master was. I handed him my camera and said, "Make sure you get my picture. I'm not doing this again." After he hooked up my static line, I managed to get my feet on the tiny little step outside the doorway, and gradually I slid my butt halfway out the door. The engine noise was deafening, and the prop wash was incredible. It was like being in a tornado. It was trying to suck my body right out of the door. I was holding on with all my might to the opening, with one hand ahead of me and one behind me, fingernails digging into the aluminum skin of the plane. Jumpmaster had the nerve to lean over to me and yell in my ear, "Are you scared?" I said, "No, you ninny, I'm petrified." The next thing I remember is gently swinging back and forth under my chute. I looked up and grabbed the toggles that you steer the parachute with. It dawned on me now. I had never steered a parachute before in my life. There, down on the horizon, was the 100-yard diameter bowl of ankle-deep sand, the landing site. It looked like a speck down on the ground. So here I was, trying to judge how fast I was falling, and how fast the wind was taking me, and how often I should steer into the wind and with the wind. It wasn't until I was 80 or 90% of the way down to the target that I finally realized why they had asked the question, "How is your hearing?" You see, there was an experienced skydiver down in the middle of the bowl who had a megaphone, and he was hollering up to the jumpers as they came, "Steer into the wind. Steer with the wind." I never heard a word he said. For a first-time jumper, I came close to hitting the landing site. Unfortunately, unlike horseshoes and hand grenade tossing, close doesn't count in parachute landing. Outside the 100-yard diameter bowl of sand, it was like reinforced concrete. I came down, crash, splat. No graceful ballet parachute landing fall for me. I was more like a bug impacting a windshield at 60 miles an hour. I laid there, moaning and groaning, wondering when the paramedics would arrive to scrape up my body off the ground. After waiting and waiting, I struggled to my feet and staggered over to the jump center. I found my jump master and asked, "Did you take my picture?" He said, "Cliff, why, when you went out of the plane, did you flap your arms and kick your feet? You know you can't fly." I asked again, "Did you take my picture?" He said, "Cliff, I was so worried about you that I completely forgot about taking your picture. I did remember later. I think I got you." When I got home, I had my pictures developed. And there is this expansive picture of the rolling countryside. And smack in the middle of the picture is a tiny orange and white dot. That is my parachute. That is the total historical record I have of risking my life for a thrill. The moral of the story is, if you are going to risk your life for a thrill, hire a photographer. And remember, thou